Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sanko for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport, who's finally back in the States. Hopefully him and his wife and whoever else went. I don't know if they went, just the two of them or who else had a good time overseas. But today we are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the OG, the guy that helped me get started in this space over at Detroit Bad Boys, Laz Jackson. Laz, what is up, my guy?
I'm doing great. Thanks you both for having me. It's definitely the dog days of the offseason. So I know we got stuff to talk about, but I'm also excited to see in which direction this podcast gets taken off the rails.
It's going to happen, right? Like, that's the best part of having you on. Me and Omari, like, we're just going to, somewhere it's going to go crazy, Omari.
Yeah, kind of like how USA hit the KD button today. We just hit the last button. We were like, we just need a spark. You know, it's the dog days. Nothing's going. We're down 10-7. Number one, we weren't down 10-7. But yeah. Beyond that.
All right, so first, before we get into any Pistons content, we may talk some Olympics at some point as well if we have time. I got to get your thoughts on lawn care because I'm like swimming over here, Laz. Omari has no understanding of this. He's cooking
I'm
me.
a little bit of an understanding.
Like yesterday you said I mulch. You thought I mulch. I'm like, I would never mulch. That's disgraceful to somebody.
Why is that? Why is that disgraceful?
Huh?
What's wrong with mulching?
Because then you leave it laying on the grass. And
Isn't that good for the grass, though?
I don't know. It might be.
Wait, mulching the lawn or like mulching?
Yeah. No.
Oh, yeah.
The lawn when you cut it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so I just got to get your thoughts because Omari thinks I spend too much time, that I'm trying to be like an egotistical, like force everybody else to feel bad about themselves on the block. And that's not my motivation. So I got to get your thoughts on this, Laz.
So from what I've observed, like the people who care really about their lawn, like they do it for them, right? Like they don't necessarily do it to appease other people, or if like your HOA like mandates it or whatever. But Bryce, like you don't got a HOA, right?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say
this is coming from within. This is self-vote.
Yeah, okay.
My personal thing, I did lawn care growing up. It was just me, my mom, and my sister, and so like as the like quote unquote man of the house, like I had to do all the lawn care. And so when I like may start making enough money, I was like, I'm never doing this again. Yeah. Someone is doing this for me, and so I haven't done lawn care in like 5-6 years. But my lawn looks nice. So like that's my take. Like if you wanted to if you want it nice, get somebody to do it for you, because I'm not into that.
I respect it. Like I can live with that one. That's not an anti-lawn care argument, Omari. No. That's just an he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Where do
I'm
you
anti-lawn care. I am. I'm anti-lawn care in general, for sure.
Okay.
Omari wants like native plants and stuff in his front yard.
Yeah, I want like a fruit tree in like my front yard. Well, no,
I
want it in the backyard because people would steal the fruit if it was in the front yard.
No, Omari wants like the rock, right?
That's
like
selfish. You won't plant your fruit tree in the front yard because you don't want to let other people have it?
Well, it's just certain types.
There's no way that fruit tree would Bryce, feed the entire block. It would go beyond you. Feed
Bryce,
the world.
I live in a different community. I don't want people on my front line. I want people.
I don't want to provide near my house because then I got roots threatening my foundation. Yeah, like that's no bueno.
No, that's what like I am anti-tree for a couple. The wind blows out here, guys, and I don't need a tree falling on my house or my car or anything like that.
Or something.
Yeah. And then also, that's why everybody gives me credit for the trampoline in the ground and the safety to the kids. My number one motivation is I don't need my trampoline blowing over into the neighbor's yard, ripping down their power lines, which happened to the guy across the street. So,
wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, like our really good friends that live across the street, over their fence, into the next door neighbor's yard, rip down their power lines. And of course, the power line, once it's to the pole to your house, guess who pays for that? You do. So they paid for all of that to get fixed back up. So, and then
is that just like a regular gust of wind, or was that like a special storm?
It's when storms come, like if it's just regular wind, usually it's not that crazy, but like a storm comes through, the straight line winds off the storms are way more prevalent than like a tornado actually hitting. I mean, that obviously happens, but yeah, we have some pretty crazy wind, but like also I don't like mowing leaves.
You got like tornado damage, right? You're insured.
Sure. Yeah.
Like some random wind, Geico is like, hell no, we're not.
So and we just don't have a lot of protection where we live either. There's not a whole lot of it's not buildings and, all around to protect it. So, all right, I'm cool with Laz's answer. I respect it. I get it. Omari will continue to work on it.
Okay. But I've learned a lot. Like, I've always seen mulching as like killing two birds with one stone because you fertilize the grass, but then you also don't have to bag it and do all the other stuff, right? But only
pile though, like that's not actually mulching.
The key to
with you to evenly, that's more work. Like
the key to mulching is you have to mow more frequently, in my opinion, because if you let it get too tall and thick, you go to mulch it and then it just leaves it laying on top of I'm not about that. I will say Randy got real jealous yesterday that nobody was commenting on her flowers and all of that. So she's about to get in on this on Twitter. She's growing she's got lettuce and watermelon and carrots and all of that stuff on top of her flowers and everything else. So we do that stuff as well, Omari. We don't kill the bees in the front as they're pollinating and cross-pollinating between the flowers. Like, we're environmentalists in that way, so give us a little bit of credit there.
Okay, no, I'm happy to see that. The flowers were I agree. We were giving all the grass all the credit, but the flowers definitely set the scene as well. It's like a team effort. Like, that's a team effort line. Like, I see the collective vision there, which is also pretty heartwarming and inspiring. And you have the trampoline in the back. Like, you guys just have like
little slice of Americana.
A little slice of Americana. Exactly.
All right, let's talk about Pistons. Laz, this is where it could go out. We could literally do this all episode long. We could just talk. Something would come up. All right, let's start with JB. We're not going to go in chronological order this time. I know that's, in general, I like to do that, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on all of these things. But now that you have the big picture, for the most part, right? I think this roster is mostly rounded into shape. You mentioned, we have the one roster spot. They have the one roster spot. What are your thoughts? What were your thoughts on JB? And specifically now that you've seen this roster, your thoughts on JB and how he can handle and fit with the roster that Trajan has put out there?
Yeah, I think JB was a good decision as a team who's like struggled to establish a baseline of competency. JB is a guy who's proven he can get teams like to that competent level and like elevated slightly above it. The thing you keep hearing is that like he has a hard ceiling or whatever. Like they didn't get out of the first round last year, had to scraw and claw and fight to beat Orlando this year, and then got like promptly beat pretty badly by the eventual champion Celtics. And so it's like, oh, he doesn't really win in the playoffs. It's like, that's not the concern for Detroit right now. The concern for Detroit is like not becoming a national story by like setting an NBA record losing streak, right? Like let's win some games first. Let's establish a way that we play in an identity before we start worrying about how many wins and losses. And I think JB, over his stops in Houston and Memphis and Cleveland, has shown that he's able to establish a defensive identity. Omari, you covered JB when he was in Memphis, right? Like, you had that one overlap season, and I remember you were on the pod talking about how like that was a transition season for that Memphis team, right? Like, they traded Conley at the deadline, I think. Like, Gasol was gone before the season. But like, you still had like young dudes like fighting and like playing hard and playing well. And to me, that's a big sign of coaching, when like, that's something we really didn't see last year, is this team like continuing to fight through adversity. They just like faced a ton of adversity, right? And we still had open questions at the end of the season about like how they would make their way through that this season. And now I think we have a better idea of like, this team will be able to have an identity defensively and persevere and like win some more games than under Monty Williams.
When you look at what JB did with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and like not necessarily just the scheme as much, but just handling those two types of guys, does that? But also, when you look at Evan Mobley, you look at Jaren, so you've also had bigs who hopefully some of that experience can roll off of Duren as well. Just seeing the players he's worked with, does that kind of add to it as well? Not just seeing what he's done at previous stops, but that some of the players he's worked with also have some overlap with what he's going to have here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it gives you a framework, right?
Yeah.
Especially for Cleveland in the Donovan Mitchell and Garland, Ivy and Cade. I'm a little. That's my like lone outstanding question for this team, though, because right now, if you look at the roster, it really does seem like they're setting Ivy up to be the backup point guard, and that would be. I mean, like, honestly, like the number 5 overall pick, like if he's a good backup point guard, that's like not a terrible option. But I think that would be disappointing, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But if it's in the service of setting him up to be a high level player and still succeed like inside of that context, I think it's a good thing for him. And I think it's a good thing for the team. It's also a good thing,
especially with the extension in the year. Well, eligibility in the year.
Yeah, it's like if we're going to pay you, we need to know like what kind of guy you're going to be, and if you're better in this role, or if you're better with the ball in your hands, and you're better like in when things are more geared towards you, then like let's put you in that to see how effective you are at that, so that we know how much to pay you, or whether or not we want to pay you at all, which is still an open question.
Let's stay on the offensive end, because I feel like that's probably where fans have the biggest questions, right? Like I feel like when JB first got hired, the defense kind of speaks for itself, I think. And I'm curious to see your thoughts there also. But I think people's biggest worry was lots of 2 big lineups in his previous 2 spots. That probably had to do with the roster. And I don't think that there's a roster that absolutely forces that. I don't know, with Isaiah Stewart, Paul Reed, maybe we'll see some in the second unit. But just overall offensively, are you worried about a lack of creativity? Because I feel like I've heard that spoken with JB, and this roster specifically kind of needing that. Do you not think they need that? Where are your thoughts on that? It doesn't even have to be specifically to JB, but just in general, where they need to go offensively, scheme-wise.
So the Chase Down podcast is like my like guiding star for like all things Cleveland. And they talked a lot about how JB did a good job coaching around the limitations shooting wise of Isaac Okoro, who like had a good percentage from 3 this season, but teams did not treat like a shooter. And they had some good examples of offensive sets and stuff that they had run this past season that took advantage of the fact that like teams weren't really defending Okoro. Like I think that's something that it's very easy to see a world in which like Asar is kind of like implanted into that role, and Asar is a better passer than Okoro. And so there are things that can be like coached around. But I will say that like 2 years ago, like, yes, they were very stagnant offensively, but it was a lot of like, we are doing what works, right? Like Donovan Mitchell, high pick and roll works, so we're going to keep doing it. Darius Garland, high pick and roll works, so we're going to keep doing it. And so it's like, if it's a case of I need to adjust to like when it stops working, like I'm fine with that, because I think the Pistons is like, at that point, like you are starting from a place of, we found something that works, right? Which as much as some of the, like Monty did some creative stuff last year, but they never really found a like solid offensive identity, I think. And so it's like, again, just as long as you start from a place of something that works, I think you'll be in good shape. Yeah.
Well, I thought Monty ran good sets and actions like after timeout at times, but it seemed like the scheme and flow, like we were sold. I don't know if we were sold. We all assumed this 0.5 offense is coming, and I felt like we never really saw that. And to, just back up your point, I was looking at the Cavs team stats. They were 30th in pace and 17th in 3-point attempt rate 2 years ago. And then this most recent season, they jumped to 22nd in pace and 7th in 3-point attempt rate. So it seemed like, JB was able to push that forward. I don't know. Amari, you may have some better understanding of maybe who kind of seems like JB's a defensive guy, or, I know we just got some more assistant coach news. Is there any kind of understanding, like, is Luke the offensive guy coming with him from Cleveland, or anybody else on? I know Fred's more of the shooting coach, not necessarily the offense as a whole. Do you have any perspective on that of what assistant may kind of be the OC, quote unquote?
Yeah, I think the coaching staff is still coming into shape, so some of that's going to be seen. I think if you look at reputations, Luke Walton's had that reputation on the offensive end, obviously coming out of Golden State, so you can sort of, speculate based off of that. But, I'd expect his staff will be finalized, probably pretty soon here. So I think we'll have more clarity on that pretty shortly. Laz, but I am curious, because when the JB news first came out, it seems like some fans were split. Like, I know that there is, reporting on Sean Sweeney and, like up and coming guys, and end up going with a coach who had already, like they say, retread or whatnot. Did you have any opinion on that, or any like preference going into the process? And then after they hired JB, did any feelings change, or was it pretty consistent?
So when we got the reporting that was like, if you're doing a first time front office like leader, you also don't want to do a first time head coach, like that is something that makes sense to me. I think the this process, I do wonder how the process would have been different if like at the beginning of the offseason, Troy Weaver and Monty Williams had like both been fired and they would have had more time to do a coaching search. And in addition to the front office search, it seems like everything's like, we haven't really seen them play any games. And so we're still kind of in like a speculative and a little bit of a honeymoon phase with JB. But I do wonder like how things would be different. On the other hand, like you look at some of the names that were hired this season, like the Pistons weren't getting Mike Budenholzer. Like JJ Redick was not leaving the podcast studio to come coach the Detroit Pistons, most likely. Kenny Atkinson, like Cleveland is a better job right now than Detroit. I think Kenny Atkinson was a guy like I always thought did a really good job of getting the most out of teams that like did not have those Brooklyn teams like weren't overly talented, but they definitely like made the most of what they had. And I always admired Kenny for that. And I thought that might be a good fit for the Pistons. So to have that like not fall into place, it's like, yeah, okay, like that's fine. And then if she was like between James Borrego and Sean Sweeney and JB Bickerstaff, like I'm fine with JB. I had heard like I would also have been fine with Borrego. I also would have been fine with Sweeney, but I just think the Pistons really needed a new direction in terms of coaching. And as long as the person wasn't like woefully underqualified, like I think it should have been worked out fine.
We'll get to the players here in just a second. I want to ask one more question because really JB's rep comes on the defensive end. And this team was like, as much as we talk about lack of floor spacing and turnovers and all of that, this team was pretty bad defensively. Now, again, we're going to talk personnel in a second, and a lot of that has to do with personnel. But what are kind of your expectations? I'm not going to ask you to be an expert on JB Bickerstaff and the defensive scheme and all of that. But what are your expectations defensively in terms of he did help his teams improve? So do you think he can get something out of Jalen Duren that we've all wanted? K, J.I., etc. Like, do you expect to see a jump on that end?
I expect to see like a small jump, right? I will be right now, like if you look at the roster, if I think about the guys who I think are going to play, like none of them are really standout defensive players. And so I do kind of worry about that. But at the same time, like with vets, like you don't have to worry about vets. Like you don't have to worry as much about vets, like not executing the scheme or like being out of position. And so I think once you kind of, again, like you build that baseline of execution, then you can kind of build on top of that and let the kids like figure out exactly like what they need to be doing and like how they can freelance. Like I think that will be beneficial. But in terms of like base defense, like I think like the roster still says like we're probably a drop team. Like I don't want Duren switching everything, and I don't think we're going to be playing like Stu and Duren in the front court together to start. Like maybe you switch with Stu as the main bench big, but I do think that like of paramount importance will be like fighting through screens, getting over screens, team rebounding, and ball pressure. Like I think those will be things that this team is set up to do pretty well.
Okay, so let me ask real quick. We fell into this one last time. Who do you think is the best guard? So we're taking Asar, Ron, those guys out. Who's the best guard defender on this team? So you're looking at what? K, J.I., THJ, Beasley, and Marcus Sasser.
Yeah. So you guys
and I guess Dennis Jenkins, right? Like I can't throw like we can't exclude him. He's on a two-way.
Yeah. You guys did this, and I was like in the car, and I was like scratching my face up, like, "Ooh, this is not a question." Really one of these. So like, I think it might be Cade by default. We saw Cade have some really effective moments last season. I'm in particular thinking about a game against Atlanta in which he was like really effective against DeJounte Murray. But that is very much like by default. We all are very familiar with Jaden Ivey's defensive struggles through the first 2 years of his career. Marcus Sasser's just like a little bit too small. And Beasley, I think, acquitted himself well as a defensive player, like for the Bucks last season, better than he has in the past. But on the other hand, like it's easy to be better when you have Giannis and Brook kind of like lurking behind you. And the Pistons don't got that. So we'll see.
All right, let's go to a short break, Omari. Whenever we come back, you can start off with whoever you want. If you want to start with the draft picks, you want to start with the free agents, you do that, and we'll start talking about the players actually on this roster after this short break.
All right. right, we are back with segment 2. And before we lead off, I'm going to say I forgot to shout out Kyle.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. I was at the mall yesterday, and I'm like pulling out of my spot to leave, and there's like a car like waiting behind me to like take my spot after I pull out. And as I'm about to pull out, like they kind of honk a couple times, like get my attention, and I look back like, is this somebody I know? And I back up a little bit. And he's like, Omari. And I'm like, what's up? And he was like, yo, I'm a fan of the pod. And we're like talking for a minute. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to shout you out. So shout out to Kyle, fan of the pod. Again, like, even if I'm about to pull off at the mall, if you see me or wherever you see Bryce, like, chase us down. Like, we'll definitely shout you out. And we love that real life interaction. I know Bryce was like a mini celebrity at Summer League the other week. So.
Yeah, no, it really is the coolest part, right? Whenever you're just especially at Summer League, you're just standing there and all of a sudden somebody recognizes you. Obviously with YouTube, this has changed. People actually know what we look like, but hopefully I'll make it out to Detroit this year. We can either do a live or at least be able to come out to a game and see everybody. So yes, that's anytime you guys see us do that. Also, help support the pod. Like, subscribe, rate, review. You guys know the drill. Help us get those numbers up. We appreciate it. But who you got first for Laz, Omari? Who we want to dive into?
Yeah, let's just start off with the rookies. Ron Holland. I think we all agree that he got better as Summer League went on. But just initial Ron Holland opinion after the draft, and then how did that evolve after seeing him in Vegas?
Yeah, you guys know I was a big fan of Ron Holland pre-draft.
Yeah,
I wanted to run something by you though, Omari and Bryce. So we saw Holland be, again, like very productive in terms of like points and rebounds, but also very inefficient in terms of like just shooting percentages. And we also saw him make some like very like head scratching shot choices. We also saw like as a part of that, he also had a very, very low turnover rate. I think he only had like 3 turnovers the entire Summer League or something like that.
Yeah.
It was 1 per game. Yeah. So yeah, 4? Yeah. 4 in 4 games.
Yeah. So Bryce, like when you're going through that, are you like, okay, like he only had 4 turnovers, but he had 12 bad shots. Like, do I count that as like half a turnover? Like how does that, and like, if we can cut down again, because that's bad decision making. And so if you can cut down on some of that, it's like maybe we up some turnovers, but we gain some efficiency. Like what's the balance there in your mind for Holland?
Yeah, I think I put it in my notes and on one of my breakdowns from the Substack was like some of the field goal percentage, I think, is just decision making. He has to learn that when he gets into the lane, he's not just going to be able to score over it. You meet Victor at the rim, you should probably pass the ball. Like, it's probably the better decision than trying to put him on a poster that's not going to work. Or I even like some of his touch on some of his shots, but it's just like, if you're not on balance, if you've drawn 3 guys to the lane, I think that was probably my biggest thing coming out of Summer League was the field goal percentage at the rim. I'm still kind of bullish that he's going to shoot it. I don't think the jumper is just broke mechanically. I think it's going to get there. And so it's like, he can get to the rim, right? Off the ball, zoom actions, transition, whatever. He's got to be able to make the right decisions when he gets there, whether it's to finish, how he finishes, whatever it is, Laz. So yeah, I think the low turnovers were awesome. I think, but the decision making plays into the field goal percentage.
Yeah. I liked Holland more the less he had to dribble. And so I was like, and that, like that's a young guy in general. But I think if you want him to be effective faster, like you're going to have to do more like stampede handoff stuff. You're gonna have to like run him off some off ball cuts. You're gonna have to like trying to open up stuff for him without shooting gravity. So like it might be tough, but like if you can get him a like runway and you can get a big like out of the paint, like he has a great chance of like initiating a good shot or getting fouled. I do think he got fouled a little bit. He should have got more calls in some.
He should have got.
5 free throw attempts again. Can I ask you guys okay, so this is interesting. I want to ask a question, both. And Omari, I do want your thought also. So I won't interrupt once I ask. I think we all probably agree that he's, I don't want to say he's coming off the bench. Like his role is going to be this off the bench, what we're outlining, right? Off the ball cuts, transition, those type of things. Is there value then, Laz and then Omari, in playing him G League minutes, all alternating somehow to where he can play this other role of like, on ball, the man, primary option, whatever. Because I don't know that he's going to get to play that role even in the second unit, especially if J.I. is running the second unit. So I'm not saying send Ron Holland to the G League. I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering, Would you see some value in that? Or does he need to get those reps right now early in his career?
Occasionally. And maybe just to start the year to stay kind of stay ready. I think especially as the season winds down and the Pistons have less to play for, it's very useful to have this to experiment in the NBA lab and trying to figure some stuff out as an on-ball guy. But yeah, as I've been putting together what I think the roster, what the rotation is going to look like, I've been saying I don't think Ron is going to be ready to play right away for this team, and I don't think the Pistons should hope he's ready to play right away. And so if he's not going to factor into the 10-man, 9-man rotation, yeah, sure, it makes sense to send him down to the G League. And if he's in the G League, he absolutely should be working on the things he's not good at, because he averaged 20 a game in the G League last season, doing a lot of the stuff he wasn't good at. So you want him to develop, and you want him, but you also want him to build better habits than the ones he currently has. And so it's a factor of decision making instead of just go shoot 8 threes a game to show that you can do this. But I'm curious to hear what Omari has to say as well.
Yeah, Omari, 10 games of being the guy. Is that something that would interest you?
Yeah, I think the thing with Ron, well, one, it's just really tough to see minutes for the Pistons, obviously, barring any injuries, but it's the first time really in the last 5 years that they've had an opportunity to just say right off the bat, hey, we want you to play for the Motor City Cruise. This is going to be your role. You could have a very, specific plan for him. You can compare what he did with the Ignite and then get him onto a Cruise team that's going to have better point guard play. He's going to have Dennis Jenkins. He's going to have some guys that can actually move the rock. And, you could, and that's pretty good data, right? Because you have a guy who's a year older, playing against a lot of the same people, but, in a more structured environment. And to me, that's why you invest in the Motor City Cruise. It's not just to get the second round pick some run, or, in the past, we've seen some of the first round guys get reps down there just to get reacclimated. But then the Hawks have had a lot of success just to run whoever, into their G League system. And they've had a lot of success with that, right? I think Ahmed Thompson played some G League games with Houston last year. So that's what I would want to see if Ron Holland does get assigned. Just a very specific plan to get him comfortable, see if he can spread his wings a little bit, get him more catch and shoot threes instead of, Laz mentioned, some of the bad shots he had to take last year, and then if the opportunities come in the NBA for whatever, and then of course you call him up and, you could, I'm sure he'll benefit not having to take the shots he took in Summer League if you're only running him in cuts and, in transition and whatnot. But yeah, I think pretty much from the start, if you have the Motor City Cruise, it seems like a great opportunity to really use that and get Ron Holland up to speed quicker.
Well, do you think that's his ceiling, I guess is my point here, Laz?
Yeah.
Is his ceiling potentially the second option next to K that can take on-ball reps at times and do that? Because if it's always just off-ball cutter, just come off zoom actions, get out in transition, offensive rebound, be the second best defender on the team behind Asar, then maybe it's not worth this. But I think if you see that higher ceiling, which I honestly do, I mean, I said that from the beginning with Ron Holland before he was ever a Piston, is I think that ceiling's there. I just don't know the percentage chance outcome. But Omari said, if there's a specific plan of, hey, let's take 10 or 15 games throughout the season and let's go make him the primary guy, and so he can still get those reps. But if you don't see that ceiling, Laz, then I don't know that it's worth it. Hey, just settle into your role. Do you see that potential outcome as a ceiling for him?
No, I do.
The Jalen Brown. Let's just throw out the name, right? Everybody uses it. Yeah. Jalen Brown.
Jalen Brown. Yeah. I absolutely see that as a possibility, as a high-end outcome for Holland. You look at some of the fluidity off the dribble he already has. He had one really nice mid-range pull-up in the first game. Was that Philly? Yeah, I think so. He had a couple really nice left-hand DHOs, left-hand finishes. It's that, you can see the vision. It's just interspersed in between, I'm going to put my head down and drive into 3 guys now. Right. And so he's 19. And so you want to be able to facilitate an environment in which he can reach that outcome. And for now, in his rookie year, the G League is a better spot for him to do that. Yeah.
Especially if the Pistons actually want to win some games, right? And I think the other component here is if you want Jaden Ivey to get some of that freedom with the second unit, you can't also have, I don't know that they both can play that role even in the second unit. So Omari, any other thoughts on Ron, or do we want to go ahead and go to Bobi? Or
yeah, we can talk about Bobi Klintman.
Bobi, and then we'll get to the free agency. So
yeah, because he's a guy that came in and like most second round picks, like you only know so much about them, especially a guy like him that played in Australia. But sort of the same framing with Ron. What was your perception of Klintman coming into summer league, and then how did that evolve once you actually got to see what he could do? I mean, especially with the passing aspect, of course.
Yeah. I had zero frame of reference before he was drafted by the Pistons, but I like the frame. Obviously, the passing is like a nice plus, but the shooting ability to me was like the big standout. I can't remember the Pistons, like Bojan, right? It was like the last time the Pistons had like a 6'7", 6'8" guy who could like really shoot like that. And we saw what a difference that made for the offense, like when he was able to play and when he wasn't. The thing I'll say though is like Bobi's very much not Bojan, because he shot like, what was it, like 9 for 28 inside the arc or something like that.
Yeah,
it was just like you see he cannot finish inside the paint at all, and it's a strength thing, it's a technique thing. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, but like, as we talk about the G League, as we talk about development areas, like having a guy like that in your G League system who spaces the floor and opens things up for a Ron Holland, like I think is very valuable. And it's also an opportunity for him to work on that aspect of his game, right? Like the shooting and the passing will like immediately make him a contributor at the G League level. And I think that like that's good, right? I never have high expectations for like second round guys. Like the fact of the matter is like most of them don't work out. And so if you get a guy in there and he facilitates things for the G League team and like makes Ron's life easier for the months of November and December, like I'm cool with that.
I mean, we've kind of gotten burned on these second round guys recently, right? We get excited about the Isaiah Livers, and then there was a Luka Garza, for a little bit, and it's like,
I was going to say, why are you dumping cold water on the Klintman hype train? Like he's
who?
Pistons, no, Laz.
Like, I was just saying, don't call me out. That was Laz. Okay,
but only because like Pistons fans get so excited, and they've always gotten so excited for the second round guys. Like I'm not even talking about modern fans. I'm talking going all the way back to like when I was in middle school. Like the second round guys would get so much hype coming in. I'll do another fan base that gets more excited for guys after 30 than the Pistons do. Like somebody just mentioned, what was his name? The really quick dude. That came out like 5-6 years ago. He was a guard. He came out of Tennessee. Jordan Bone. I saw random Jordan Bone on Twitter a few days ago. I was like, why are we talking about Jordan Bone?
David Lee was at one point a member of the core four. Hey, here's what I'll say. Peak second round Pistons draft picks was in the mid 2010s whenever they took Chris Middleton. You had Spencer Dinwiddie.
Johnny Jerebko had a great rookie season. Yeah.
Bruce Brown also. I went on the Athletic NBA show, and one of the trivia questions I knew was going to come because Brown and
Tyree Thomas
and Middleton were, NBA champions that were Pistons second round picks that won championships on other teams. And that was, sorry, now I'm just bringing up bad vibes. That's messed up. That's my fault. Like this went off the rails.
That's what I deserve for dumping water on the Bobi hype train.
No, I think, listen, he was good at Summer League. Yeah. And part of it was he made shots. He made threes. And part of the thing with Bobi is he hasn't always done that consistently. He had a great stretch at the end of his freshman season at Wake Forest where he shot really well. But in 26 games, 3.5 attempts, he shot 34% in the NBL this year. So it comes and goes. I think he's an awesome second round pick. I thought that was as a second round pick, I thought it was awesome. And specifically for this team, Laz, because what I like, and you kind of alluded to with Bojan, is it's this true, I see him as like a true 4-man. So eventually maybe there's low man rim protection and the rebounding and then the passing and the skill level from there. So it's absolutely a second round pick that you should be taking. I just don't think it's this year. And I mean, again, they just paid Tobias Harris $26 million to play 30 plus minutes at the 4 for 70 plus games. There's not a whole lot of minutes left at the 4, even if Bobi was ready. And I think we're going to see Asar at the 4 some. Tech would be cool in some smaller lineups. Stu and some bigger lineups, like 10 or 15%, not a lot. But I think he's interesting. I want to finish off with Summer League and these guys. And then last segment, we can go into the free agents. Dennis Jenkins, Tolu Smith, thoughts on Marcus Sasser's Summer League? Like, hit them all.
Sasser had a rough Summer League, obviously. I think it's just pretty clear at this point that he's not a point guard. And as such, like, having him have to be an undersized shooting guard. It's like maybe that works with like a Jaden Ivey, Marcus Sasser lineup. But even then, I think there are better ways to accentuate like what makes Jaden Ivey great than putting Marcus Sasser next to him. And so that's looking a little suspect, especially when you recall that it cost the Pistons like 2 second-round picks to
the trade up for it.
Like that's kind of rough. Jenkins seemed like a quadruple A NBA point guard. Like, you have triple A and you have the big leagues. It's like he's like right in between that level. So it's like I hope like having a guy who organizes and sets things up at the G League level to help those guys out and help the other guys out in their development, and I think is wonderful. We saw with the Ignite last year, not having that guy can be deleterious to guys' offensive development. So I'm excited about that. Tolu Smith, like, man, I didn't know what to make of Tolu. Like he was great, like good frame, did like one or two things a game. You're like, oh wow. And then like you just do some like head scratching stuff. It's like, does this guy like know like he's playing? Like what is going on? So as a guy who needs to learn how to think the game a little bit better, I think that's a perfectly fine like G League swing, especially when you remember that like if you are like that tall and can think the game, like you are in the NBA. The NBA like needs centers and backup centers who can play. And so like if you get a guy like that in your system and get him to figure out how to play NBA basketball, like that's a perfectly fine swing.
That's a cruise center, right? Yeah. Like you would be perfectly like that's not a two-way guy, but that's a cruise center.
Yeah, absolutely.
But right now we're going to go to short break. Omari, when we come back, let's get into the free agents, trade, all of these veteran acquisitions and what Laz thinks about those.
All right, we are back with segment 3. Laz, let's start with just an overall offseason recap. Based on what you wanted the Pistons to accomplish this offseason, and looking at the roster now, how satisfied are you with where things are?
That's a good question. So I was much more concerned with changes in leadership than I was with like changes in the roster. And so like from an offseason perspective, like, yeah, they got rid of the GM and the coach, and like that's what I thought was necessary. It's like that's a big win right there. Tobias Harris at that price, you see a lot of like national guys being like, why'd the Pistons give him $26 million? And it's like, who else was going to get that money to play in Detroit? Like nobody. So, and like Bryce said earlier, he's going to play 70 games. He's going to give them 30 minutes a game at a position that they like really need when you look at the other guys on their roster. And so like, I think that was a big win. So getting Fontecchio in for like less than $10 million a year was fantastic in my mind.
No third year kind of hurt though, right?
Yeah. But he'll be like, he wants to get back on the market when he's like,
I was gonna say that's a Tech thing. I don't know that's like Trajan mishandling negotiations. Yeah. That's like I could see Tech like standing firm. The Tech contract made me like the overpay for Tobias was kind of balanced by, he didn't even come close. He underpaid Fontecchio as far as I'm concerned. So sorry, go ahead.
No, and in 2 years, like my thing is like in 2 years, the extensions for Ivy / Duren will also be on your books. And so you're going to want space, right? This is why I'm fine with like the balloon payment on Tobias Harris as well. The Hardaway Jr. trade was like a little bit eyebrow raising, but you look at what other salary dumps like cost and is like, it's fine. Quentin Grimes would have been nice to keep, but if he like didn't really want to be here and like didn't factor into the team's long-term plans, wasn't going to get an extension here, like sure, yeah, that's fine and that makes sense. Beasley for 1 year as like, hey, we're going to trade you to a nice team at the deadline. Thanks for giving us 8 attempts a game at 40% for 50 games. Like I totally fine with that. Like okay with that, especially and like a good bit of business by him when you look at what Tyus Jones got is like to basically
or Gary Trent Jr. Like Gary, I mean the argument is Gary Trent Jr. gets to play on the Bucks, not the Pistons, but he's also playing for what $4 million less or something, right?
Yeah, market's tough for role players shorter than 6'4" or 6'4" and under. Like if you're not Derek White level, like it's just man.
None of the shooters got paid. Buddy Hield didn't get paid either.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So like, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. So now we're in a place where they still don't have, unless Ivy is like, it's the plan that Ivy is the backup point guard. Or I think a very heavy like minute stagger is in place. And I think that the roster right now is shaping up to be like one of Caden Ivy is always on the floor. One of Tech and Harris, one of Tech and Tobias is always on the floor. And then like one of the bigs. And then like you kind of like mix and match kind of around that. There's like those two spots are covered. But they still don't have your classic rim protecting center. Like I like Paul Reed. The more I watch Paul Reed and like they acquired him, I was like, this guy like does a lot of stuff he's a very high level doer of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious to see if they do experiment with some Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart lineups. I don't know if those lineups would work, but I think like a lot of stuff would happen if you put those two guys together.
Don't you have more of an appetite for that than an Isaiah Stewart, James Wiseman second unit front court? And this isn't throwing shade at Wiseman. It's just archetype of player and kind of what they potentially could do. Like I have a little more of an appetite for Stu and Paul Reed than I would Stu and a completely non-floor spacing. I don't want to, like, Wiseman wasn't unskilled. I just have more of an appetite for that. I could see that at times.
Yeah, and you can, and you know, Reed found ways to make himself useful in like high leverage situations for a really good team as well. It's like that's the guy you want around. That's the guy you want doing stuff. And so like those are my like really big outstanding questions. Is like if Jalen Duren doesn't take a step, not like a leap, but like a step in the right direction defensively. Like there is going to be like a lot of questions about how this team is going to perform in terms of like rim protection and shot blocking, which is going to be tough.
I don't think I have a whole lot of faith defensively. This thing gets a whole lot better just based on personnel. I would like to see a little bit of an uptick. What do you think offensively? Like, do you think JB can consistently have lineups on the floor that space the floor, work together, has enough blend of yeah, like, don't you feel that? Did you feel that way last year? I'm not trying to protect Monty. I do not want to turn this into, I feel like the roster is better suited to have a competent offensive groups of five than last year's roster did at this time. Am I crazy for feeling that way?
No, again, like if one of Tobias and Fontecchio is like always on the floor, you always have like a floor spacer at the wing position. Between Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr., you should always have like a plus, like defense has to pay attention to this guy's shooter on the floor. Between Cade and Ivy, you always have like a primary ball handler type on the floor. And like from there, it's like, okay, you throw in some Asar, you throw some Stu, you throw some Paul Reed, you throw in some Duren. Like you're not going to win 50 games, but like from like that's a good baseline to like make stuff work and like figure it out from there. So like, yeah.
And if you put Asar, If you put Asar, you can put Stu, right? Like you can balance Asar's non-shooting with a little bit of shooting at the big position. Or if you put Duren, then you can balance that with maybe Harris and Tech on the floor at the same time to balance that stuff. Especially if Ivy's on the ball, his lack of floor spacing is a little bit less of a concern. So Omari, I know you want to get in here, but I didn't want to feel crazy just going like, I feel better about where this roster is offensively, how it makes sense, putting guys in the right positions.
You look at Isaiah Stewart, and I mean, I know we're talking free agents and he's not, but given that he's the one big that can defend, we're proven, but also, can shoot and could balance some of these lineups, especially if you're playing a star or Ron Holland. What do you envision for him next season? It seems like he's in this weird spot where he's like the de facto backup big, but also because of his skill set, it seems like he could end up being a guy that's tough to take off the floor as well.
Yeah, I think Stu is very valuable. I think as James is fond of saying, James Edwards III at The Athletic is fond of saying, like, there's a reason why good teams like continue to try and call the Pistons about Isaiah Stewart. But I do think he is kind of, because of the potential of Jalen Duren, Stu is kind of pigeonholed into this backup big role. And like, he's already gotten paid. So like, I think he's probably perfectly fine with that. But he is the only person, or he is the only like true 5-man on the roster that spaces the floor, unless you believe in Paul Reed shooting, which like maybe that's a maybe.
It was low volume, but
the thing with Stu is that like teams have to treat him like a shooter, which they still really didn't do last season. And if he keeps making them pay, then like that's a good thing. Like if he is able to up the volume like a little tiny bit, like I don't want Stu taking 6 threes a game, but like if teams are going to guard him out there, like, might as well take him. But do I want him like starting over Jalen Duren? It's like not really, because I think that's that's too hard a push in the direction of like, we're trying to win right now. I think you really need to spend this season figuring out what you have with Jaden Ivey and figuring out what you have with Jalen Duren, because you have to pay those guys real soon.
So I want to go back to the top where Omari asked you for your big picture thoughts. Are you quote unquote happy with the path that Trajan took in terms of just kind of like, forget the process of how they got here. You brought in floor spacers that over the last 5 years have played a ton of games and a ton of minutes, and especially offensively, that should make things better. Are you okay with kind of the role player path that they took? Or is there part of you that looks at, like, I don't think the Pistons couldn't have outbid the Knicks for Mikal Bridges. I mean, I guess maybe the young guy, I don't know. Like, they probably couldn't have. But are you happy that they didn't get involved in the Mikal Bridges, the DeJounte Murray? They haven't gone after Brandon Ingram. Like, all of these names, realistic or not, Are you okay with what they did as opposed to something along those lines?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. There have been periods where, like, right now, I think Brandon Ingram's actually kind of undervalued. But I think the firsthand experience Trajan has with Brandon Ingram and like the lack of interest is like probably kind of tells you something. Even if I think Ingram is a really good player, between the Pistons needing to develop their young guys on the wing, between this draft class looking really good and you not needing to win like 35 games and Brandon Ingram helps you do that, it makes a lot of sense like why they didn't go in that direction. I think like I definitely could have talked myself into it, but I didn't think it was completely necessary. The other guy that kind of enters that conversation for me is Levine. And that's again where I think Levine is undervalued from an asset perspective and maybe even a little bit better than Ingram because like he's locked in for like 2 or 3 more years. It's just the numbers really, really big. And
well, but I think there's an argument that it would end up being shorter though, right? Like based off what Brandon wants.
Yeah, if you give Ingram another 4-year deal like after this season, then like longer. Yeah.
So,
but Levine would be a really good fit offensively for this team as a guy like next to Cade. I think like that makes a lot of sense offensively, but you're sacrificing like a little bit of defense, and also that probably costs you like one of Ivy or Duren in the trade. And I understand like not wanting to pull the plug on that experiment like quite just yet. So yeah, I'm fine with like not going star hunting this offseason. This really wasn't the offseason to do it. You know, I'm looking at VJ Edgecombe and AJ Bailey and like we're not getting Cooper Flagg. Like I've already just like accepted that like we're eternally cursed and that's not happening.
The reverse jinx already underway. There we go.
You got to start early. But like there's talent. There's a lot of talent in this year's class. And so like I understand the desire to not like be like full speed ahead. Like we're going to try and win 40 games. It's just like, no, like let's still see what we have in these guys and prepare to build.
And you can do the Jazz if all else fails, right? Like if they're better than maybe even what the three of us expect, you pull the plug at the deadline and do what you say. Like, all right, Ron, take over, my guy. Let's see what you got for the last 20 games of the year. And you know what? Then if it pops off, then you don't need Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe because you got Ron Holland and Cade Cunningham. And, you know, if you win that many games that you're out of the sweepstakes for the top 5 guys, which right now most people have a top 5, then your young guys were probably much improved and you feel like you're in a pretty good place. So sorry, Omari, I kind of...
No, I was going to say, let's talk about the empty roster spot, which is like the last remaining piece of intrigue, like for this offseason. Like, do you have any preference to what they do with it? Do you see, we've talked a lot about obviously Cade and Ivy being staggered, but if one of those guys gets hurt, I mean, that essentially leaves you with one point guard. Like, do you see a need to fill that with maybe a Markelle Fultz or somebody, or do you value the flexibility, just given that clearly a couple more teams at least are going to make moves before the deadline and try to get back into the contention conversation?
So I would fill that spot, but I wouldn't fill it with a point guard. I feel like if one of Cade or Jaden goes down, then you start like tinkering with like, I know I said Marcus Sasser like wasn't a point guard, but you start tinkering with like Sasser plus like Asar on ball reps, or like Sasser plus like Ron on ball reps, and like we get that experiment that we talked about at the top of the pod started a little bit quicker. I really think they need to find like a defensive center. Like maybe like not even somebody better than Taj Gibson, than as a player, somebody who can actually play. But like I would be calling Portland and being like, or like, what do you want for Rob Williams? Right? Like you can't hold 3 centers. Like you're not going to use this guy. Like what do you want for him? Right?
Hey, the doo-wop Reith disrespect, man. I would take both of those dudes. I'd take Robert Williams for the defense and doo-wop for the floor spacing. But sorry,
but Portland can't play all those guys. So it's like, which one don't you want? Like, let's talk. Oh, there was one more like backup center that I was like, that guy's always been potentially intriguing.
Well, Orlando is hoarding all of them as well. They brought all of those dudes back.
My conspiracy theory is that Lauri Markkanen. My conspiracy theory is like Lauri Markkanen is like holding up like a lot of this stuff, and so we're waiting for, I think it's August 6th. Is like you can extend him, and like that's the last day he can be traded. It's like they figure that whole thing out, and then New Orleans is going to grab one of the Orlando centers, and like that's because our New Orleans desperately needs a center, and so like they'll get that figured out. But yeah, we call up Orlando and be like, hey, like you brought back, you don't want to break up the Wagners, like Goga's at a good price. It's like what do you want for Goga? Or even like Wendell Carter Jr. They didn't lean as heavily on Carter Jr. as much as I thought they would. It's like maybe that's a guy that the Pistons could be interested in, but a center who I feel comfortable with defensively, like in drop coverage, who's like not 6'9", right? Who's taller than that. It's like that's I think still the lone remaining need for this team, and that's how I would use the open roster spot, Omari.
Yeah, as far as the rotation, I mean, obviously at that point you'd have 4 guys, and you still kind of have this mismatch of, but that gives you insurance in the event that Reed and or Duren don't really pan out. But at that point, are you just cool with not seeing Paul Reed?
Duren's had ankle injuries, right? Like he's missed a couple games because he fought LeBron and missed a couple games like here and there. So like having a 4th big is, and especially at like a low price, is like not.
Laz, I didn't realize this till I think it was our last episode. Stu, the last 2 years, has played 50 and 46 games, respectively. Like, sneakily hasn't played as many games over the last 2 as what I would have guessed after 68 and 71 his first 2 seasons. So, I mean, it is kind of interesting with that, with the center position and maybe being some more minutes and games to go around than what I would have thought. We want to do a little bit of Olympics before we let you go. Omari, I know did you guys watch the game today? I assume we all watched the game today. Let's do a little bit of Olympics. Laz, thoughts? What'd you think about exhibition games and today?
So I watched the highlights of the exhibition games and all of today's game. My first thought was Jason Tatum, 0 minutes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder what necessitated that.
It's very interesting that Jaylen Brown's not on the team. Tatum is on the bench. Drew Holiday starts, and Derek White gets to play multiple minutes off the bench as well. And it's just
some 4D chess going on. They're thinking
it's very like Kerr and everybody else. How can we drive the wedge between these guys? Because that's our only hope of beating the Celtics is pissing them all off and not liking each other.
So like Tatum was also, I think like in the exhibitions, he was playing the Durant minutes, and like very clearly Durant was real good today. And so like that you understand like why they didn't go in that direction. But like even as the game was ending and it's like very much out of reach for Serbia, like to get no run for Tatum and Halliburton was interesting, I'll say.
So I thought they were going to move KD into the starting lineup whenever he got back. I still wonder if they don't. And you push Booker into the second unit, and then you kind of figure it out from there, like who plays and who doesn't. But here's one thing with Olympic play, they can't take their foot off the glass because point differential determines their overall seed in the bracket play. And so you want to get that number 1 overall seed. So like that Steph Curry 3 at the end of the game wasn't just like, whatever. It wasn't meaningless depending on how much Canada or whoever comes out of the other pools, how much they win their games by. So
yeah, let's become first take real quick. Oh
my gosh.
It's a feature of American basketball cooked. LeBron James, 39 years old. Kevin Durant, 35 years old.
Where are you reading
74 years old. They were the 2 best players. Steph Curry's 36. We don't see Tatum, no Halliburton. Anthony Edwards had a couple nice moves, but
a couple.
But the old guys are dominating this team. What happens in 2028?
Oh,
is this it?
So no.
Because most of the time it's like international, dog. Like Americans are losing the long-term battle.
Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards,
Booker's young, like still.
Booker, so Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, Cooper Flagg,
Wemby,
Paulo.
The other teams have all the big dogs, man. Like the biggest dogs.
All the big dogs.
The biggest dogs
Evan
are on the
Mobley
other
should
team.
be on this team. That's my
Evan Mobley.
Evan Mobley. You're gonna need that guy in 8 years or 4 years. You should have him around in the system. Like that's him and Chet are going to be your attempt to answer the Wembanyama tsunami that's coming. So I would have tried to figure that out. AD will be too old and Bam's too small. But
Brandon Miller, we didn't even mention Brandon Miller, Tyrese Maxey.
Omar, what do you think of these AD Bam lineups? That's been the one thing that's kind of stood out to me is that's really funky. And also not something I really expected from Steve Kerr, but it's worked. It worked today because they played those lineups when Jokic wasn't on the floor. And it's anything would work against Serbia when Jokic wasn't on the floor. But what do you think of those two big lineups?
I was going to say, if you could just beat a team up, then by all means, go for it. I'd love to see him try it against France. I don't think he could do it against every team, but against Serbia, especially when nothing was going, you're just let's just see what works outside of, KD going 8 for 8 in the first half. The slow starts have been funny to see because it's this team clearly is probably the best team there still, but you see that gap closing. That's why I posed the American question and became first take for a minute because I just don't know.
I mean, the gap is obviously closing, right? They played Serbia today, who had how many NBA? I mean, they had Jokic, they had Bogdanovic, they had Misic, and
Jovic.
I know there's
they
another
Jovic
one
too, right?
Yeah, Nikola Jovic. And so at one point they have 4 NBA dudes on the floor playing against, and I realize it's not the same level, but Canada I think has 10. I mean, it's just once the problem with the
Canada
other teams is they're not balanced.
Yesterday though, that was a very funny end of game situation.
Right? But it's France doesn't have the guards right now.
Yeah.
Nolan Traore may have something to say about that over the next, 4 years from now. And Canada doesn't really have the bigs, right? Canada's playing Dwight Powell, KO, as their bigs. And so that's where America kind of has the advantage here. Wes, make sure to remind me that I did not mention Cade Cunningham in this conversation. So yes, Cade Cunningham, and to give everyone, Scotty Barnes, Paolo Banchero, all of those guys as well. So, but no, I mean, obviously the other countries are catching up. It's just different than what it used to be. I mean, look at first team All NBA this year was what? Giannis, Luka, Shea, Jokic, 4 of the 5. And Joel, I know he's playing for Team USA, but Joel wasn't allowed to be on first team. So what do
Joel's selling. Joel is.
No, I was just going to say, so you brought up the 2 bigs off the bench. What are your thoughts about? My theory is Joel's going to start because there's a reason.
I mean,
Joel's on this team, and I figure there you go.
So I can say that because I'm not plugged in and I don't actually know things, but it seems
I'm not plugged in either.
That the extraction for I'm not going to play for France and ruin everyone's day is I have to start. It's okay, sure, but he's been really ineffective, and I wonder if he's still recovering from it because he did kind of break down a little bit at the end of the playoffs. The playoffs are not they're at this point 3 months in the rearview mirror, and you still have to train and everything. They've been in Vegas. It's I worry. I wonder if he's not fully healthy, and that's interesting because Philadelphia did a whole bunch of stuff this offseason with the big caveat that he was going to be ready when they were actually going to start trying to win in the playoffs. And if he's hurt now, it's it's kind of tough. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if it gets to really we have to win time and they say that we don't need Embiid or we feel more comfortable without Embiid on the floor. Again, as another matter of politics, I wonder how that goes down.
Wes brings up a good point. The U.S. versus the world would be the battle, right? It's not necessary. I mean, and listen, they may not win the gold. I think there's a chance that they lose. I mean, a team gets hot, whatever. These other teams are good enough. But USA, even if you just put France and Canada together, that would be an insane roster. So it's a great point by Wes. Any other thoughts, Wes, Omari or Laz, Olympics or Laz, thoughts on the offseason in general? You mentioned what the Sixers have done this offseason and, needing Joel healthy and all of that. Any surprise from the offseason? Any big moves? Hot takes right now as Omari wants us to go first take all of a sudden on the Pistons Pulse here at the end of July. Any thoughts from either of you on the offseason or the Olympics?
Omari, what you got?
Nah, I don't have any deep Olympic thoughts. I'm just here for the hoops at this point. You know, I just want to turn my brain off and just
okay,
watch.
Well, what else do you watch from the Olympics? Do you watch any? What other sports?
I was watching, what is it, canoe slalom today or something? Like, amazing. Like, I was like, that might be my favorite Olympic sport is canoe slalom. I also like the skateboarding. Like, I was
okay, interesting. We're
like,
not
I bit the bullet. I bit the bullet and got Peacock today. I was just like, it's $8 money to have it for the next month. There's something else here. I won.
Okay,
they have the
Omari,
the gold watch, whatever it's called.
Do you make the calendar reminder to cancel it in 30 days? Or do you
I do.
Okay, there you go.
I'm a notorious, like, very the end of the free trial.
Peacock isn't going to get free money from Omari.
No more money from me. You get the $8 and I'm out. Like, I'm out.
I watched the rugby sevens yesterday. That was awesome. That was really cool. Laz, what are you gymnastics?
So
bicycling? What are you into?
Before the basketball, they have water polo, and like we got our butt kicked by Italy. But like that's always like I can't fathom like just being in the pool that long and like not drowning.
The stamina, man.
And then like on top of that, like you're trying to make like athletic change of direction moves. You're trying to like think about like ball movement and ball placement. The water, like someone like makes a wave and your like pass like doesn't go where you like thought it was. Like that is still wild a sport to me. So like I'm eternally impressed by that. But yeah,
Wes says gymnastics and handball.
Yeah,
love gymnastics.
Gymnastics is great. I appreciate they're starting to do the packages too, where they're like, okay, like this is what makes a good gymnastics score. Because I'm just like she did a whole bunch of flips. Like awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm like, these are all turns to me. Like I don't know the difference. You know,
I've watched so many gymnastics routines where like that's definitely a 10. It's like that never happens, you idiot. Why are you even thinking it? Are we all in on track and field though?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Did you watch Sprint on Netflix?
Yes, it was amazing, Laz. I loved it so much. Did you enjoy it?
I loved it.
Omari, you got to watch. It's really, you need to watch it before I think they start on Friday. So you have like 4 days. This is Sprint right now is only building up to the World Championships last year. And then I think they're recording them. I think there's going to be one that comes out for the Olympics also, right,
like,
Laz?
I think Sprint is recording now, and like Simone Biles has a docuseries.
Kind
of being recorded right now for Netflix. So I think those are both like going to come out. We're going to see episodes of that like come out like during the Olympics, like as things progress.
It's really good. It really kind of dives into some of the dynamics and the different clubs that people, and it goes to Jamaica, to Great Britain, Italy, because the guy from Italy was the world 100 champion. Yeah, that was so cool. Do you have Netflix, Amari, or do you need to steal ours?
No, I have Netflix. Netflix. I don't need to steal.
Well,
can I say that publicly?
Or Peacock money.
Peacock, yeah. I got. If I have Peacock, I have Netflix. Like there's like a streaming hierarchy, right?
I mean, you're spending $10 a month on those flashing lights behind your TV back there. Like you got plenty of money.
Man, yeah. Hey,
what is that?
It's just a little pizzazz, you know. It just adds a little spice to the room.
Okay, it just gives the room a little vibe. I got you.
You know, it just adds a little something.
Okay,
that's all it is. Yeah, it just adds a little spice.
Last thing,
Laz, you predicted it. We'd go off the rails.
Where did you guys like random patriotism level go like during the Olympics? Like, are you like we bust out like the American flag like T-shirts, bust out like the porcelain eagles and everything? Or are you just like, oh, like this is cool? Like
I'm Team USA. Like I want them to win everything, but I'm not like jumping up and down going. Other basketball, I feel like I have a little bit of like skin in the game for whatever reason. But I don't go too crazy.
Seeing everything LeBron did from the opening ceremony through the exhibition games and all that, like it's the closest I ever get to just feeling like a God bless America, like in my heart. Like you watch that, it's just like, man, like we're the USA. Like we're the USA, you know, like you start thinking USA.
There's a level of arrogance you can have during the Olympics, right? As an American that every other country hates. Is Snoop Dogg like the non-athletic face of the Olympics this year also? Like
he's the face of everything.
Oh man, like they were showing him during the swimming. He's sitting next to the dude's wife. He carried the torch. I didn't watch a whole lot of this ceremony, to be honest with you, but yeah, Snoop Dogg's in there with all of that. So I think it's interesting too. Like we had Dwayne Wade on the call today, like just the different announcers and broadcasters they get that we don't always get from other sports. So, man, this is why I love having you on, Laz. The first 60 minutes was awesome. This last 10 minutes was a blast. I enjoy it so much. So I know we all got other stuff to do, so we'll let him go. Laz, appreciate you so much. plug what you got going on, man. Let everybody know. Make sure they're following you on Twitter and getting all of your thoughts and takes still.
No, Bryce and Omari, thank you both for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love chopping up with you guys. I'm moving to Michigan in the not too distant future. And so I'll be like really happy to do, like, I'll show up on the live show in like February.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. But of course, people can follow me on Twitter at Laz Chance. That's at LazChance. And I still do like a little bit of like consult work for Detroit Bad Boys. And I still love everyone over at Detroit Bad Boys. And so I highly encourage people to check out DetroitBadBoys.com for like more of your like analysis and like fan perspective of what's going on day to day with the Detroit Pistons.
And on top of that, make sure you're subscribed to the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, where our guy Wes and Blake are doing the weekly lives and podcasts. Like,
Blake has been so invaluable as I try to like catch up with the 2025 class. Because like I don't watch any high school tape. I know nothing about any of these guys coming in until they start playing college basketball. So I get like you, Bryce, and Blake, guys like you guys grinded like EYBL tape for me. Like, perfect. Thank you, because I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, I get it. So yeah, Detroit Bad Boys still doing huge things as always. They've been a mainstay. You guys know that. And Laz is kind of the godfather of that. Again, I owe Laz a lot. Him and Sean Corp were, I wouldn't be anywhere without those two guys and giving me a start at DBB. As much as I've had good people like Omari and Wes, those guys were there from the start also. So appreciate you guys. Thank you again, Laz. Omari, take it away, my guy.
As always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chen, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes as always. And we will be back next week.